evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Healthy Start Medical Education webinar. If you can give us just a couple of seconds, we'll let everybody have a chance to enter the room and we'll get started. Well, thank you again for joining us. We're so happy to have you guys with us this evening. I think you're going to really enjoy the information that you're going to be learning tonight. So a couple different things I'd like to share with you. The first is we are willing and able and to take an open Q&A. So we'd love for this to be a live interactive education. So you can use the Q&A button that's on your Zoom platform. If you click that button, you can ask your question there. And, if for some reason we're running late and we're not able to get to your question tonight, we can at least answer you back via email. So please take advantage of that. So we actually have a very, very special guest on with us tonight, Leslie Stevens. She's actually been in the world of pediatric sleep, breathing, and airway for over 35 years. So she's a wealth of knowledge. She is CEO and president of HealthyStart. She's also an international lecturer and trainer. And quite honestly, I really don't think there's a question in the reference to the subject of pediatric sleep, breathing, and airway and HealthyStart's connection that she cannot answer. And really, when you have the backing of a company like HealthyStart by Ortho, you have over 51 years, over 4 million cases, and tons of research to back you. Most importantly, Leslie is the mother of 3. So her goal and desire is to provide every advantage for children to allow them to live healthy and happy lives. And one of the things you're going to learn tonight is that there is a silent epidemic affecting 9 out of 10 children. This epidemic manifests itself in a variety of symptoms that can be easily overlooked, misdiagnosed, and most unfortunately left untreated. So it's absolutely critical that children are evaluated for sleep and breathing habits. Leslie's mission is to educate both dental professionals as well as parents to ensure children a lifetime of health, happiness, and success. So I'd actually like to take this time to hand the floor and the mic over to Leslie Stevens.
Thank you so much, Susie, and I'm so happy to be here today, and I'm hoping all of you have an opportunity to basically learn a little bit more about sleep disorder breathing in the pediatric patient, as well as learning more about basically how we address it, how do we identify it, how we're going to evaluate it, and obviously, most importantly, how we're going to treat it. I'm not sure if all of you are aware, but so many of the different entities, the ADA, the AAO, have basically constructed outline of what each and every one of our practitioners should be doing. Basically evaluating, identifying, and most importantly, educating your patients on potential health risks that they might see in these children. So tonight, I want to help you to understand what it is that we're looking at, how we can identify it, how you educate your patients, and then basically how you can actually get started immediately to address these issues in your patients. It's an area that more than likely you are not addressing right now. It is unbelievable the number of children that are affected by this, but most importantly, it's what each and every one of us have always dreamt to do, is basically help our pediatric patients. I mean, what better gift is there but to provide dental health, but more importantly, health for a child for a lifetime? And this is what we're talking about. So here is an excerpt from the ADA, and basically it requires, or it asks all of their practitioners to basically examine and identify signs and symptoms of deficient growth and development. Through the next 45 minutes, you'll learn that that is one of the primary concerns that we look at. And I'll be really realistic that so often I'll talk to doctors and they'll say, yes, I definitely evaluate for sleep and breathing issues, but I might only look at it from the position of I need expansion. Expansion is great, but it's only a small portion of what the overall outward symptoms or underlying root causes that we should be identifying. So we want to make sure that you're looking at it in its entirety. We want to make sure that a parent understands the risk that their child is currently exhibiting and potentially having, not only for today, not only for tomorrow, but possibly for the rest of their lives. Obviously, children are growing. If we can intercept during their growing years, we can make tremendous changes, not only for their sleep and breathing, but promoting the proper growth and development. How different will that look like? I'm not sure how many of you look at adults in sleep apnea, but when we look at them, we're only a band-aid, which is so unfortunate. I mean, we can help them. Yes. I'm the biggest cheerleader. Yes, we're making a difference. Yes, you're going to sleep better tonight. But you have to wear something or you have to address it each and every night. If you forget tomorrow night, I can't help you. So, what if we can go back in time when maybe this problem was initially created and we're able to go in and make those changes in the development of that child, not only for that day, not only for the next day, but for the rest of their lives. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, yes, I do this. I've been screaming from the mountaintops for the last 35 years, but I, I I don't see anything else that is as important as the conversation we're going to have tonight. So I hope you're looking forward to it. I hope you put your safety belt on. Let's get going. Let's talk about what this is. I think I've met a lot of you possibly at the AAPD this past weekend. I know a lot of you are from there. There's some from other places. Um, when we have these medical webinars, it's amazing how many doctors we approach. But I'll tell you, every Tuesday, we do reach out to parents and we talk to parents across the country. And many of you will say, well, many parents don't know about sleep and breathing issues. Well, I've got news for you. Every time we do one of these parent educational videos, we reach out to about 2,000 up to 18,000 parents per night. That's a huge number. And yes, we have right now we realize that about 40 million children in the United States are affected. Yes, are we addressing all of them? No. We're probably only scratching the surface. But at the current time, that's amazing what we're doing. So I hope sit back, kind of absorb it. This will be recorded. You can listen to it more later on. We'll tell you different ways of learning more about what we're talking about. But I just want you to realize how important this conversation is. So as I had mentioned, you'll see that 9 out of 10 children will have one or more of these outward symptoms. And these symptoms include things that we see on a daily basis: mouth breathing, snoring, teeth grinding, swollen adenoids and tonsils, chronic allergies, eczema, asthma, ADD, ADHD, aggressive behavior, depression, irritability, anger, peer problems, few friends, bedwetting, difficulty in school, especially in the subjects of math, science, and spelling, delayed or stunted growth, restless sleep, nightmares, morning headaches, daytime drowsiness, frequently waking up at night, sleep talking and walking. I got news for you. This basically describes most of the kids you're going to be seeing. This is a silent crisis among America's children. So what are parents typically doing? Well, if they see one or more of these outward symptoms, typically they look at them as an isolated situation. They do not look at it as this is one of many symptoms that probably are created because of underlying root causes. And that is basically what we should be educating our parents. But instead, what are parents doing? Parents are being wonderful advocates for their kids, but they're looking at each one of these as an isolated incident. So my child has symptoms of asthma. I'm going to see a specialist. Am I going to prescribe maybe steroids, maybe other kinds of pharmaceutical drugs? Absolutely. What if my child has ADD and ADHD? Well, then I'm going to look at another specialist in order to address that. So many of these parents are looking at different avenues for each and every one of these outward symptoms, and they include different drugs, prescription drugs, psychiatric testing, counseling, therapy, surgery, sleep studies, allergy testings, a variety of different studies or prescriptions for these kids. But what if these are all related? So these different outward symptoms or outward treatment plans that doctors or specialists are prescribing are basically only addressing the symptoms. They're not looking at the root cause. And many times they tend to be short-term band-aids and often involve several drugs with many side effects. And unfortunately, it can be costly, painful, time-consuming, and ineffective. So tonight, let's look at the root causes. If we can explain to a parent and educate them and basically see how these outward symptoms are linked together to common root causes, maybe we have an answer for your child. So what are these underlying root causes? Well, research over the past 20 years have linked mouth breathing, narrow palate, improper tongue placement, and jaw relationships as the primary underlying root causes that we're going to address and identify tonight. So how do we screen for sleep? Well, we can do a visual assessment. So as your patient is coming into your operatory, absolutely take a visual assessment of them. Maybe tonight you're thinking about your own child. Maybe you're thinking about your neighbor's child. Remember, maybe there's a child or a patient in your practice that it's been a head scratcher. How do I help this kid? Well, take a visual assessment. Look at the child on the left. Obviously, we see the very dark circles under their eyes, but also look how their head is positioned. You'll see that the head is leaned forward. Why is that? Probably because they're trying to get more air. Look at the boy on the right. Again, a lot of dark circles. We call that venous pooling. Look at the mouth. The mouth is separated. It's open. I would guess this child would probably be a mouth breather. This child looks like they almost have a double chin. Well, actually, this child is not heavy. However, the position of the lower third of the face makes it appear like they are heavy. Many times it's retrognathic. What happens with the retrognathic kid? Their airway. What gets compromised? Probably their airway. These are all different ideas. What else can we look at? Let's take a look at the profile of the child. Look at how the profile lines up. More importantly, let's focus on the lower third. You can see how deficient that lower chin is. The mandible is exceedingly retrognathic. Look at lips parted. Look at the rolled lip. My guess is an overjet. Look at the circles under their eyes. The girl on the right, same deal. Look at how the chin blends into the neck. There's no definition. Again, a rolled lip, dark circles under their eyes. These are all different clues that as your patient walks into your operatory, you should already in your mind calculate, this is a child that definitely has some issues. I think I need to delve further. So what do we look at? The most important tool, and it sounds so simplistic, but it is so effectual for so many different reasons. And this is the HealthyStart Sleep Questionnaire. And the reason being is these are 27 of the most prevalent outward symptoms of sleep. Now, if we look at the initial, we're going to look at all of these. And this starts the conversation with the parent. A parent's going to say, wait a minute, what does bedwetting and ADD have to do with you as a dentist? Great question. That will start a conversation that that parent will never know what hit them. They will be educated in ways they never thought they would. At the same time, look at number 27. It talks about speech problems. We see a lot of children with speech issues that have sleep issues because the tongue. Is the tongue in the right position? No. Is the tongue as strong as it needs to be? No. Does it have the endurance to be in the right position? No. So when a parent will look at these outward symptoms, we're not only going to ask them to identify them, but we're also going to ask them to notate the severity of each one. So it'll be from 0 to 5, 5 being the most pronounced. And this is going to be the basis when you start. And then as you progress, you're going to ask the parent to do a follow-up as the child progresses to see the changes, and you're going to be shocked how fast it occurs. Here's a study that was done on over 500 children, and it was basically looking at these sleep questionnaires and identifying what is the most prevalent conditions that we see and what other associations can we make. So the results of this study basically said mouth breathing and snoring are commonly associated with more sleep disorder breathing symptoms than any other symptom study. 9 out of 10 children had one or more symptoms of sleep disorder breathing. Huge number. 60% of the sample had 4 or more outward symptoms. 1 out of 5 children experienced bedwetting. Let me make a little comment about that. I had no idea how prevalent bedwetting is in older children. What this number means, or what this represents, in a classroom of 20 kids, you can anticipate 4 of them to be bedwetters. We don't typically talk about it. Even when we present the sleep questionnaire to parents, many times a parent will avoid, not address, not put a number on the bedwetting question. I would absolutely implore you to bring up the conversation, but in a third person. Say many kids that exhibit these sleep issues have bedwetting issues. It's not a conversation that we typically have, but it's really important for us to understand what is going on with your child so that we can anticipate or address improvements that occur with the use of the HealthyStart system. So as soon as you bring it up in a third person, I can tell you, I guarantee you, you will know immediately if that child has a bedwetting issue. Parents will look, the child will look, they won't know what to say. You want to ease the apprehension that they have. And basically, our idea is basically to know exactly what we're trying to address and to know how effectual we are in addressing those issues that the child is experiencing. And the last point is very, very critical. Between the ages of 4 and 12 years of age, 92.6%, let me repeat that, 92.6% of the symptoms will not self-correct, and 30% will worsen with age. What that means is if you and a parent and the sleep questionnaire identify these outward symptoms in a child, that child has less than an 8% chance to self-correct. It's a really important statistic for parents to understand. If it's my child, I know I have less than 8% chance. Am I going to address this? Absolutely, 1,000%. And we'll give them different reasons why, and we'll continue addressing that. But that's a really important statistic. So why is these outward symptoms, or what are these habits or characteristics we can identify? The number one habit that we identify with sleep issues is mouth breathing. 43% in this particular study. I actually think probably the number is even higher than that. And the reason being is when we mouth breathe, we open our mouth. Just by opening it a half an inch, we basically eliminate 6 millimeters of our airway. For a 7-year-old only has a 7 millimeter airway. So that means that child is trying to breathe through just 1 millimeter of airway. What does that mean? Well, guess what? REM sleep requires oxygen. If a child's breathing through 1 millimeter of airway, is that body getting enough oxygen? No. Is it enough oxygen to get into REM sleep? No. What effects does lack of REM sleep incur? An enormous amount. Endocrine, immune system, hormonal system, neurological, these are all affected. Basically, the body becomes out of focus. That child does not have the reparative sleep they need. There's been a study that actually links that to Alzheimer's and dementia. We're not saying that these kids are going to have dementia or Alzheimer's next year or anything like that, but these are different aspects that affect the body and affects the person. I mean, you want the child to be as healthy as possible. If we can provide them the proper growth and development, provide them the proper habits, we're going to set them up for success for life. We're going to set them up for a very healthy life and make more permanent changes in that child so that they continue that ability and obviously obtain the proper level of sleep, REM sleep, health that we would want for these children. So even when we look at these children that have mouth breathing issues, we also realize that they'll have 8 other outward symptoms. And these can include any one of snoring, difficulty listening, often interrupting, talks while sleeping, allergic symptoms, fidgets with hands, etc. So we realize that it basically creates a whole avalanche of other symptoms as well. So the implications of this study basically finds that sleep disorder breathing is much more common and affects children even as young as 2 years of age. We begin treatment as early as possible to ensure permanent changes. Identifying outward symptoms displayed in 90% of the children that enter your practice can significantly reduce this epidemic and enable you to successfully treat the overall health of your patients, which we know that that's the reason why you got into dentistry. I mean, this is works hand in hand with what probably your motivation and basically your mission is in your practices. So let's talk a little bit about airway and addressing the habitual issues. So again, we talked about the child that by mouth breathing basically reduces their airway down to 1 millimeter. What does 1 millimeter look like? Think of it, give a parent a visual, a coffee stirrer. I don't know if you've ever tried to breathe through a coffee stirrer. I actually decided that one day I was going to try to breathe through a coffee stirrer the entire day. Well, I got through about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, and I had the most massive headache. I tried Excedrin, I tried everything. The only thing that helped me was going to sleep that night and waking up the next morning, and I woke up without the headache. The problem is these kids that are mouth breathing don't have the opportunity to sleep it off. They're going to wake up the next morning again with that same headache. That's unacceptable. We have to figure out a better way. So what kind of airway are we addressing or identifying or working toward? One that looks like a garden hose. Think of it this way. A garden hose is what the airway of a child should look like. When they mouth breathe, obviously they're cutting off that airway and preventing the proper amount of oxygen from occurring. Another way to look at it is look at what this ideal airway is. Look at the dot here. This is actually a 7 millimeter airway. And for a 7-year-old, this is what we anticipate. We would expect a 7 millimeter airway to get 100% airflow. Now, if we have a compromised airway, say for instance from mouth breathing, we know that we eliminate that airway down to 1 millimeter. Look at that size. It's incredible. How would a child even be able to get any oxygen? Well, they actually get 11%. That's not enough for REM sleep. So this is another excellent example to explain to a parent what that child is enduring. Why is this occurring? Well, prolonged use of pacifiers, prolonged use of nipple bottles. Both of these areas basically depress the tongue. If the tongue is depressed, obviously we don't incur nasal breathing. We tend to be mouth breathing. The mouth hangs open. What we are trying to do is to put the tongue in the upper palate. So for instance, when we say the letter N, where that sound ends is where our tongue should be at rest. So try it right now. See if your tongue is in that position when you are at rest. Probably not. So maybe we have more problems than just our pediatric patients. Maybe we need to help you with the adult habit corrector, which will also help basically place that tongue in that right position. Lack of breastfeeding is another culprit in this conversation. I always mention to doctors, please be careful how you present this to a parent. Every parent blames themselves. And if you bring up lack of breastfeeding, you'll hear every reason why that wasn't an opportunity for them. So we always are very careful. We kind of tiptoe into that discussion. We'll be really honest. In this day and age, both parents typically work. Is it possible for a mom to do 2 years of breastfeeding? Probably not. Maybe they'll say, you know what? I was able to pump and be able to provide breast milk for my child. But again, what was the mechanism of us delivering that breast milk? Typically a nipple bottle. And that nipple bottle depressed the tongue, created a mouth breathing, and basically eliminated the strength and properly the habit or the proper position for that tongue. We also see that soft diet plays a part. Here's an example, graduate puffs, the nutritious snack that melts in a baby's mouth. Nothing is nutritious about anything that melts in the mouth. What did we typically would see? Well, a more tough diet basically helps expand the arches. If the arches are expanded, we're actually able to create the space for the tongue to be positioned up in the palate, like we said with the letter N. But when we use bottle and nipple pacifiers, we create a suction in the mouth, and that suction basically collapses the arches. And with that collapse of the arches, what happens? We eliminate the room for the tongue to be positioned properly. So it's kind of like a circular problem that happens. And explaining it to a parent without any blame. The idea is we're not placing blame. We're saying, here's the situation. Now let's see what we can create and make a better situation. If you see a child that comes into your office with an open bite, what's immediately? Well, probably a result of pacifier, prolonged nipple bottle, possibly thumb, finger sucking, and tongue thrust. These are all habits that we can address using the HealthyStart, and we'll show you how. Talking briefly about an airway, understanding the nasal cavity, the oral pharynx, the nasal pharynx, where those compromises occur, where the hard palate and the soft palate combine, looking where the tongue is placed, and obviously the airway. The nose kind of gets a raw deal in this conversation. It is extremely important, and it's important that we understand what the functions are. Well, the nose has 5 functions. It serves as an air passageway. It warms and moistens inhaled air. Its mucous membrane traps dust, pollen, bacteria, and other foreign matter. It contains receptors which sort out odors, and it aids in pronunciation and the quality of voice. We see this so frequently. 43%, as we said, are mouth breathers. Please understand that this child, the car is not moving. The seatbelt was put behind them because they were so sound asleep. But without those details, look at what that child's doing. How often do we see this in a child? Look at that mouth open, understanding what those compromises are. I want you to take a minute and listen to Eli. This is a great example of what we see in kids. And again, I want you to realize that these outward symptoms that we see in Eli do not improve in 92.6% of the kids. Okay? So let me get this started for you and take a listen.
I was holding it. I was holding it. He's still holding it. He's trying to take in air. There he goes. Okay, now watch. He's holding it. He's holding it. He's holding it. He's holding it. He's still holding his breath, and now he's going to gulp again. There he goes. Yeah. does it again. And again. He's holding. He's holding. He's trying. There he goes. So this has been 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and you can see how many episodes he's had of not getting calm breaths in. Now, watch what happens when I take his jaw and I just bring it forward. If I can. Let's see if I can. And I open his airway. Just bring his airway forward. Now listen to the quiet breathing. There we go. Now he's breathing through his nose. And I brought his airway, I'm opening his airway, just pulling his jaw forward ever so slightly. And now he's breathing through his nose quietly. His mouth is a little bit open, but he's breathing through his nose. Just by hear how quietly he's breathing, you don't hear him anymore. And all I did is gently bring his jaw forward.
Quite remarkable, isn't it? Well, think about it. If we could take a child and basically provide them with the areas of deficiency. So in Eli's case, obviously, he has retrognathic tendencies. He mouth breathes, obviously cutting off about 6 millimeters of his airway. His position of his tongue is probably in the wrong position. If we can promote the forward growth, allow the airway to open, put the tongue in the right position, and start expanding the arches in order to accommodate the tongue and the palate, we've got it made. Well, guess what? That's how the HealthyStart system is created. So let's talk a little bit more about that. We talk about airway. What is a restricted airway? Well, take a look. These are 2 different 5-year-olds. So the child on the left, you'll see how that airway is compromised. You'll find actually 21% of your patients will have a compromised airway. The 5-year-old on the right has a normal airway, which is great. However, not necessarily guarantees you proper sleep. And the reason being is a CBCT scan is only as good as the tool. And obviously it's taken in a vertical position. Well, we all know that's kind of the best scenario. As a child sleeps and they're in a horizontal position, the muscles relax and the airway tends to close. So when we look at these SAFs or a CBCT scan, please realize it's the best of all worlds. So even though we might see a child that has a normal airway, however, when we do that tool, that sleep questionnaire, we realize there's so many outward symptoms. So the idea is probably have a habitual issue. So this is the same patient. Here they are, look at the normal airway. Look what happens when they mouth breathe by opening the mouth a 1/2 inch. You can see how the airway is constricted by 6 millimeters. So that's part of the conversation that we need to have with parents so they understand, oh my gosh, thank goodness my child has a normal airway. Unfortunately, the habits can contribute and compromise that airway. Here's an interesting case that actually was a patient of HealthyStart. So when we look, this is a CBCT scan of a patient. And when we look at that CBCT scan, we realize that the patient, a normal airway would be basically addressed or calculated by the age of the patient starting at age 5 times 10. So this particular patient is 9 years old. So we would anticipate a normal airway of 9 times 10, so 90 square millimeters. Unfortunately, that child has a compromised airway because they measure a 53.6 square millimeters. So this patient was prescribed a HealthyStart system, and they started with the first appliance, which is a habit corrector, and they wore it for 1 month. And then we took a second CBCT scan to see exactly where that child was in airway development. So this second image is 1 month later. Notice the habit corrector is in the mouth, and we measured 337 square millimeters. Now realize that's 6 times what we measured before. But more importantly, do you realize that at age 17, our airway peaks? So a goal of an adult would be an airway between 150 and 170 square millimeters. And guess what? Bad news. At age 21, our airway starts to deteriorate over the course of our life. So the question has always been, if you have an adult that has sleep apnea, do we know if they ever reach their goal? No, we probably don't. Do we know if that, even if they did reach that goal, is that goal enough to carry them through their life? Again, a question we don't know. But if we can create an airway that is over 2 times what we would anticipate as normal in an adult, we could probably assume that over the course of their life, that airway would be obviously much more beneficial for the rest of the life of that patient. So these are some of the studies that are currently going on that we're investigating exactly the longevity of what this airway is being created, as well as the stability, as well as what changes we see in those patients that we create a much larger airway than what we would anticipate in a normal adult. So these are some of the questions, but this is what's so fascinating about what we're doing and how we're changing lives. Here's a little bit of a schematic of what we just talked about. So going over kind of what we talked about, when we look at mouth breathing or snoring, we realize that it's usually a result of extended bottle feeding and pacifier use. It causes poor tongue position and abnormal swallowing. Typically, sugar or processed foods can have an effect, and poor oral habits such as thumb, finger, lip sucking, tongue thrusting, etc. So mouth breathing and snoring can lead to a compromised airway. And a compromised airway typically means reduced airway, restricts airflow, reduces oxygen, increases CO2, affects brain function, immune and endocrine systems, swollen adenoids and tonsils, low tongue position, tongue thrust, underdeveloped dental arches such as overjet, open bite, even crossbite. And a compromised airway leads to sleep disorder breathing. And we talked about those outward symptoms. Some of the few that we can address or that are mentioned are restless sleep, ADD, ADHD, bedwetting, chronic allergies, nightmares, daytime drowsiness, aggressive behavior, difficulties in school, frequent infections. We had a list in the sleep questionnaire of over 27 of the most prevalent. So what does all this mean? How is a child or an adult affected by this? So when we look at MRIs of an individual that has normal sleep, these first 3 images basically are the MRIs of the brain function that occurs. And you can see in the red and yellow markers how much brain activity occurs. Now the lower 3 images are brain function with 1 night of sleep deprivation. It is really hard to see brain activity. We see a little area right here. So you can see how detrimental sleep or lack of sleep becomes in brain function. So all of us that have pulled an all-nighter, maybe that wasn't the best decision. But you can see how effective sleep is in neurological behavior. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do and how the HealthyStart can help us. Currently, we're 52 years plus. We've treated 4 million children. Typically, the system basically includes a series of appliances. And basically, we look at it as age-driven, or more importantly, skeletal development. We're looking to guide the child through that development. I know we focus so heavily on pediatrics, but I'll tell you, our oldest patient is 84. We can treat adults as well, but obviously within adults, we have no more growth. So what we have to do is really physically change the habits of the adult, and also make orthodontic changes, which are hard because there is no more growth. So we have to make sure that we have the parameters in place. Now with a child, it's a totally different story. Obviously, habits are less ingrained, easier to correct, easier to make permanent changes. We not only change the poor habits, but we're going to install the proper habits. Do we look at deficiency and growth? Absolutely. These appliances can promote growth. We actually can promote lower jaw growth by 54% more than control samples. Are we going to be able to expand the arches? Absolutely. We're going to make permanent changes in these children because we're working with growth and development. So again, Healthy Start is addressing the root causes. And the root causes, again, are expanding the dental arches, establishing nasal breathing, training the tongue, eliminating bad habits, advancing the mandible to correct the overjet, encouraging proper facial and growth development, and we're correcting most orthodontic problems. Sometimes we say, we're going to look at the sleep and breathing issues of these children, create the airways, which again, we find as our primary goal. Obviously, we want the health of the child, but frosting on the cake, we're going to straighten the teeth as well. So it works hand in hand. They're combined, they're related. Basically, you can't separate it out. So that's the good news. And because we're catching them at an early age, we're making more permanent changes. So the habit correction. How does this work in the Healthy Start system? Well, we have built-in myofunctional therapy. What does built-in mean? Well, we actually have the therapy built into the appliance and it's activated by a swallow. What are these therapeutic avenues? Well, we have palatal tabs, and this is going to start the expansion. We can actually, if the ideal happens and we catch the child at the ideal time, we have the ability to expand the arches up to 6.7 millimeters. Now, is that going to happen in every one of your cases? No. If you have a 9-year-old, no. If you have a 4-year-old, yeah, more than likely. Because why? We've caught them. We've caught them before those fiber bundles have developed. We've caught them before the primary dentition has erupted. So we'll talk about how that growth and development plays into this conversation. Can we prevent tongue thrust? Absolutely. We have little prongs here. We also have what we call a lingual shelf. It's more like a ramp. So every time a child swallows, it directs the tongue into the proper motion in order to provide that proper swallow. So the tongue is lifted, the tongue thrust is prevented, that place in the palate is identified. Guess what? When we swallow 1 time a minute at night, 2 times a minute during the day. So just by wearing this at night, we're reinforcing this 500 times each and every night. How quickly are we going to make changes? We're going to make changes pretty quickly. We also have the ability to, we have tabs in the lower portion that prevents the lower chin from drifting back. We can add pads so that the open bite can close more readily. We also prevent the mouth breathing, obviously with the shelf or the frontal piece of the appliance that basically prevents that mouth breathing and encourages nasal breathing. We also have a pull tab will help strengthen the lips. We want the lips to seal while they're sleeping. So the child is instructed to make sure they try to seal their lips while they're sleeping. These are all things that will happen. When they're sleeping. When is it most important? Probably when they're sleeping. Typically these kids wear these appliances just at night. What's an improper swallow? How do I identify it? Well, have a child take a glass of water. Have it on your operatory. What we typically want to see is just movement in the neck when they take that swallow of water. What we more than often see is the facial muscles being used in order to make that swallow. That is not natural. We want to have no facial muscle movement, only neck muscle when they swallow. So we'll have them swallow at the beginning. We'll make notations of it. And every time they come in, we'll have them continue to take that swallow of water. And we'll note those improvements that have occurred with the habit corrector as well as the Healthy Start system. We talked about the rates of swallow, so key, because that is the activating motion that's going to create and correct and improve the habits, the swallow, and basically provide the ability for nasal breathing as opposed to mouth breathing. An interesting study has been done. It's in the process of being published. It's for over 220 patients. And basically it goes through these outward symptoms, and it gives you the percentages of kids that presented themselves with these symptoms and the rate of correction. So for instance, headaches. We saw that out of the 220 patients, 40 of them expressed headaches, which is 18% of the study. We found that 98% of the cases had improvement, 94% mean correction of those improvements, 91% mean correction of the entire sample, 85% of the cases with 100% correction, which is enormous. So you can go through each one of these, and this is to kind of give you a guideline. These cases were using the habit corrector for 5 months, and we want to make sure that we're addressing these in the children, and we're giving you kind of a guideline so you know if that child is appropriately having those corrections, and if they're not, then we need to address it. We want to make sure that there's that nothing else that's going on for that child. I love the conversation with ADD, ADHD, and the relationship with sleep disorder breathing. As we all know, ADD and ADHD is an epidemic. I don't care how you slice it, how you discuss it, it's just rampant. But what's really interesting is most recent research shows 85% of the children that have ADD and ADHD have sleep issues. 85%. That's enormous. Why is that? Well, ADD and ADHD is not a blood test. It's basically a list of criteria that a child needs to portray in order to get the diagnosis. Well, guess what? Sleep disorder breathing uses the same criteria. So can they be misdiagnosed? Absolutely. I always say, if you suspect or you see the exhibit of ADD and ADHD behavior, investigate sleep first. If many times it's the cause of what we're seeing, many times it's a contributing factor. Either way, it should be addressed first and then see where the child lands. There was an interesting study by Karen Bonnick. She evaluated over 13,000 children, and she found that sleep disorder breathing increases the risk of ADD and ADHD by at least 50%. She also found that ADD and ADHD patients have little or no REM sleep, but have delta sleep. Patients without ADD and ADHD have primarily REM sleep and delta sleep. And ADHD was present in 25.2% of the cases that we did with that sleep questionnaire. These are so unfortunate, these statistics, but it's so important to convey them. So let's talk about ADD and ADHD. We find that 50% of children that have been diagnosed with ADD and ADHD are held back 1 grade. 30% are held back 2 grades. Well, the sad news is if that child has a sleep issue, you can hold them back 10 grades. It's not going to make a difference. That child is still going to struggle. And again, identifying appropriately can't be basically portrayed any more important than it is tonight. That is primary criteria. Now, if a child has sleep disorder breathing, guess what? Studies reveal that their IQs will be lowered by 10 to 20 points. To me, that means college or no college. This study went even further and evaluated what the value is of 1 IQ point for a lifetime of a child, and that's $170,000. That's going to make an impact. That's going to make an impression to a parent. And these are the conversation. It's not to, doom and gloom. It's to say, we have alternatives. We have a solution. We have something that can help your child, but identify it, eyes wide open. It's easier to address it today than it is 20 years from now. There's never a sadder story when I meet a parent who has a 22-year-old who looks at me and tells me, I knew it. I knew it back then. No one would listen to me. I could not find a solution. And now look at my child. So I implore you, please at least evaluate. It is so critical for these children. So Healthy Start does promote growth and development. As we talked, Healthy Start addresses kids as early as 2 and all the way up to 84. Typically, we like to look at children between age 2 and 12. Why is that? Because the normal craniofacial growth occurs then. If we look at a 12-year-old, we realize that already 89% of the males have completed their growth and 94% of the females. So the earlier the better. If you identify it, treat it. This is the reason. I would also look at the pattern of growth. You can see it's forward and down. We tend to say we want more forward growth because if a child is mouth breathing, you'll tend to see more of a vertical growth pattern than we would like to see. So we want to make sure we're promoting that forward growth. Here's an example of this. You can see a child. This is the same patient. Obviously, a lot of sleep issues, bedwetter, tongue thrust, finger sucking. But a large study that was done both in Finland, in the country of Finland, as well as Tufts University, found that a child will promote 54% more mandible growth than it will in the control sample. And here's a patient. This patient was in treatment. They just wore the appliance for 1.5 years during the transition from primary to permanent. We will continue as more of a, retention device as they continue to grow, just to ensure. But this case was done within 1.5 years, and you can see how much forward growth has occurred in that patient. Another important appliance that sometimes we add to treatment is called the MaxA. It's a maxillary advancer, and it's unique where it's going to look at the lower third, and it's going to promote both the maxillary growth as well as allow the mandible. How this appliance is designed, there is no frontal wall to it, and there are tabs behind here, and the tongue actually presses on those tabs in order to make the forward growth. At the same time, the lower arch will be dragged in the forward direction. So you can kind of see how this does. So here's how initial patient presented. Here's 1 month. Here's current. And then once we seem to make that jump, we almost restart that growth, and we allow that continuation of both the upper and lower arch in the normal forward direction. Another condition we tend to see more frequently is the class 3. Now we can see pseudo class 3 and we can see skeletal. They're two different areas. With the pseudo, this is a very easy system. With the skeletal, we'll say that we minimize the tendency for a class 3 tendency. So the appliance is designed similar to the MaxA, where there is no frontal wall. The tabs will actually push that upper arch in a forward direction. But in the lower arch, we actually have a lip bumper, and the lip bumper will hold the lower arch stable as we drive the upper arch in a forward direction. Once the jump is made, we will basically transition into additional appliances that will continue that forward growth. So you can see how that occurs, and it occurs in about 2 to 4 months. Same with the MaxA. It's very quick. Obviously, it's dependent on that child being able to push those tabs, but you'll be so surprised how quickly it moves because of the force. Obviously, our tongue is our strongest muscle in our body, so we're going to utilize it every day, all day, as long as we can. Treatment planning. So with each one of these appliances, we will go through a treatment plan. We want to make sure that each and every child gets the best and the most pertinent treatment available for them. Obviously, a lot of times you as a practitioner haven't looked at children this young. You as pediatric dentists probably do see children this young, but have never looked at it in this kind of criteria. So we want to make sure that you have almost that consultant in your office who can help you in these treatment planning modalities. And we will, be that person, have discussions with you, make sure that each patient is getting the best care they can get. So Now let's have a little fun. Let's take a look at some of the cases. Here is a case that was actually age 7. And if you take a look, here's the sleep questionnaire that was presented to that patient. This is a lot of outward symptoms. I believe there's 18 of them, many 4s, many 5s. Serious. This is a serious condition. What makes this case so unique is 1 month prior to the sleep questionnaire, they did have their tonsils and their adenoids removed, and it really didn't show any improvement. Now, they had the first appliance, the habit corrector, that was worn, and they wore it for 2 months, and we had the parent reevaluate. After 2 months' time, look at this. Look at all the changes that occurred. You'll notice also at the onset, speech was indicated, and it said very delayed speech, did not say many words up until age 3 or 4. So this is an extremely serious case, and I want you to see the changes that can occur, and they occur so quickly. And here is a child that would have been an ENT, obviously was an ENT case, and basically wasn't successful. And current research shows that 70% of ENT cases fail. And the reason why they fail is because they're only addressing one of the issues that plague these children. They're not addressing the expansion of their arches. They're not addressing the habitual problems that are occurring. They're not promoting growth and development. So it needs to be a combination. Obviously, if a child has abnormal large tonsils, sometimes we refer to them as kissing tonsils, we absolutely have to have an ENT present to evaluate them. And possibly the child will have a tonsillectomy or the adenoids removed. But that is not the end of the treatment. The treatment needs to continue because we need to address those other areas. So let's take a picture of the, look at the child. So here is at the onset of treatment. Take a look, very deep overbite. You'll see square arches. You can see some circles. The head is slightly lurched forward. So let's see how they look 1 year later. Really amazing. You can't even recognize that child. Look at the overbite correction. Look at the change in the arches. Very wide, promoting the proper changes. You remember what that questionnaire looked like 2 months later. Okay, so let's look at what the final, or a year later. Actually, almost 2 years later. Look at how the case settled. Look at the arches. Look at the, beautiful. And this was only done with nighttime wear with the HealthyStart system. So let's look at another child. Here again, you'll see more outward symptoms. You can see some 4s, some 5s. Again, 2 months later, take a look. Only 1 symptoms, wet bed. They went from a 5 to a 1 in 2 months. Here's the initial. Here's him in progress. You can see the changes in the overbite as well. Here's another case. You can see the initial. Here's the finish. Here's the comparison. Again, nighttime wear. Here's the progress. Here's the kind of the process that occurs. Here's the initial of this case. You can see they're wearing the appliance. The overbite is being corrected, but now you see the incoming permanent teeth that are coming in. They're rotated. The appliance is going to capture them, guide them into place. Here is the finish of the case in the appliance. Here's another initial and finish. Another initial and finish. Here's an interesting girl that actually mother had, she was about 35. She obviously did not have any treatment. She ended up having surgery, which was a benefit to her, but obviously surgery is not our #1 choice. She saw her daughter, who basically presented with the same issues. You can see how deep this bite is. Look at the circles, look at the deficiency, rolled lip, a lot of wear and tear, a lot of grinding that was coming on. So here she is at the onset, a lot of outward symptoms of sleep. Again, you can't even recognize her. You can see the progress, the overjet, look at the arches. Her face looks totally different, just a totally different kid. Now let's see how she progressed in the stability of the case. Here she is, even further. Here's another child who snored, bad breath, ear infections. 1 year later. Here's another child. You can see deep bite. You can see the outward symptoms. The interesting thing about this case is this was only seen for 3 appointments in the doctor's office. They lived extremely 4 hours away. They had them come in. Here's the initial, here's the sleep questionnaire. Here's 2 months later, they sent it in. Obviously speech issues. You can see from before to approximately a year later. Here's another child, has a spectrum of issues, snored, Brooks. Here's mid-treatment. Here's final, 14 years later, and you can see the stability. Now, part of what we do, sometimes people say, well, it's a removable appliance. Well, you know, it's so hard to get people to cooperate. We get 94% cooperation. And actually that was recorded both in the study in Finland as well as Tufts University. We have different mechanisms that help us. Obviously, we talk a lot about motivation. How do you talk to a child? How do you talk to a parent? How do you basically convey the importance of what we do? We also have an app that's magnificent. It is a way to actually record. What's great is the child will basically record every morning. Did you wear your appliance at night? Did it stay in all night? They get rewarded with a coin they can deposit in the bank. They can also get 30 minutes of gaming. They can pick a book. There's all different varieties of activities. Obviously, with the coins in the book, they can purchase a reward for themselves that they can pick from the toy store. On Fridays, we ask them to take a selfie. This will be cheek retractors that you will receive with each and every case. They'll take a picture every Friday. Now, this flip book that they have, basically, the parent can use. They can talk to their neighbor. They can talk. It's a great advertising. It's a base educational tool that a parent can use. All of this information is also transmitted into the portal so that you can look at each and every one of your patients. So say you see them every 6 weeks. Well, on that appointment, you can actually go back and see what happened during those 6 weeks. You can see how compliant that patient is. You can see the progress they make. So when they come into that appointment's totally different than if you have no clue what's going on and that patient comes in. So it's a great tool for you as well. We also monitor and we provide them with information on when their next appointment is. We hopefully help reduce missed appointments. We try to make it a great tool for you and for a parent, and a great marketing device for you as well. And again, it comes with each and every case. As we said, we've treated over 4 million cases. We take safety in extremely carefully. Our appliances are FDA cleared. There's no latex. All appliances are BPA free, BPS free, phthalate free, no silicone. We regulate ourselves to a class 2 medical device. We don't need to. We want to make sure you as parents, you as doctors understand that we take it extremely seriously. We want to make sure that we are providing the safest appliance for your patients. Obviously, we've treated a lot. We've been around for a very long time. Hopefully, we basically showed our characteristics and what we anticipate. So I appreciate, I have gone on probably a little bit longer than I should, but I really want you to understand and take this into account when you're determining how to implement. I'm hoping each and every one of you are sitting here thinking, okay, how do I implement? What is the how? And maybe Susie, you can take it from here and give them a little bit more information in regard to how that digital class, how do we continue this educational conversation and provide the office, the staff, and obviously the treatment for the patient.
Yeah, absolutely. There actually is one quick question, Leslie, before you sign out for a second. The question is, are there different forms for children, or different forms of screening for children?
Obviously, there are different forms. The process that we have found most effectual is obviously when we look at a child, we're going to take, number one, a visual assessment. Number two, we're going to look at a screening tool. We're also going to evaluate their tonsils, if they can breathe through their nose. And basically, there is a question on the sleep questionnaire that will say, does a child stop breathing for more than a minute? If any of those are answered, we are going to refer them to an ENT or a sleep specialist. If either one of those, they would probably have surgery if it's required for this tonsils. But if they stop breathing for more than 1 hour, we would probably look to have a PSG or a sleep study of some sort. There are other sleep studies tests, such as a NOx T3. There are different oximeters that can actually help us with the sleep issues, so we can kind of monitor them during treatment. Then we would obviously look at the underlying root causes, and then we would start treatment. So those were kind of I hope I'm answering your question that you're asking, but those are basically the processes that typically we would look at in those cases. Now, if you, when you submit a case, if we see anything that seems unusual that maybe you missed, maybe you didn't see one of these things, we will reach out to you and say, you know what, can you look at this just to make sure that we have all the information for those patients. And we want to make sure before we start treatment, we've identified the issues, but more importantly, if there's something that seems above and beyond our realm of treatment, that we are reaching out to those specialists.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And there's actually another great question from Dr. Salim. And what Dr. Salim is wondering is, can we treat the child while they're being treated for OSA?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. So obstructive sleep apnea or sleep apnea basically affects 1% to 2% of the kids. So it's not as large as what we see kids that are basically experience sleep disorder breathing. And you'll talk to different people. If you talk to an MD, they all describe every issue as sleep apnea. I really think sleep apnea only affects 1% to 2%. And sleep disorder breathing affects a large majority because it's more affected by underlying root causes. So the condition is fluid. So as we look at it, we will address those different issues. So if a child is diagnosed with sleep apnea and CPAP is basically prescribed, we look at the CPAP machine as, yes, it might be absolutely necessary for life. However, because the way the CPAP is constructed, it's going to impact the growth and development of a child. So yes, we might make one step forward, but are we taking a couple steps back? Maybe. We are currently in a research study that is occurring at University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas, Texas. And they had 19 patients that were CPAP failures. And I didn't realize, but the next step to a CPAP failure is a tracheotomy. And they're looking at 2-year-olds and things like that. That is a serious next step. So what they did was they brought in HealthyStart to come in and basically look at those 19 children prior to the tracheotomy. And they couldn't imagine. Well, the good news is none of those 19 children went on to have a tracheotomy. So yes, we can absolutely impact and change the trajectory of those children that have been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea or sleep apnea. If they do wear a CPAP, sometimes I will encourage doctors to look at possibly incorporating the HealthyStart with the CPAP, because even though the CPAP makes us one step back with growth and development, the HealthyStart can hopefully offset that so that the growth and development isn't being impacted in a degree that we typically see with CPAP use.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I will, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the digital education platform that Leslie mentioned earlier. I think that's one of the biggest questions that we receive. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. I think that's one of the biggest questions that we get. Anytime we're at any of the events where the subject is pediatric sleep, breathing, and airway, it's always, of course, fantastic information, always fantastic education, but everybody always leaves wondering, now what? You know, how do we treat these kids? And so Leslie gave you, that's what's great about Healthy Start is we aren't just about helping you understand how to assess. We're also about giving you the tools that you need to actually treat these kids. So the education platform, we have a digital education platform because we do realize that, people are all over the place. And so we give you all kinds of different ways to learn. But with the digital course, you can actually, of course, take this from anywhere in the world. And we do have doctors that join us from all over the world. The great thing about this course is it does complement that policy that Leslie was chatting about at the very beginning. This course actually complements that policy. And that policy, as she mentioned, states that it is the requirement of every oral physician to, become educated on how to assess these kids. So this meets those standards. This is a 6-session, or actually it's a 7-session digital education course. We have an additional session where it's all about implementation, teaching your staff members how to implement Healthy Start in the office so we can ensure that you are as successful as you can be and can treat as many kids as you can. But you also receive hands-on treatment of 2 full cases. So I mentioned at the beginning, we give you all kinds of different educational ways to learn. So one is the digital part. So we send you a video every Monday. You have it's about an hour and a half to 2-hour video. You have the entire week to watch the video. You and all of your staff members, because we want your staff members to be on board. We want them to be excited about what you're doing. So we give you the week to watch it. Then on Friday, we have a live interactive study clip, kind of like what you just did now, where we touch on the highlights of what we sent out that week. But each week, each Friday, we bring on a specialist to teach about all kinds of different things, everything from billing to, of course, implementing in your office, just all kinds of different things every Friday to give you everything that you need to help you to succeed. The great thing is it comes with treatment of 2 full cases, as I mentioned, and that gives you a different style of learning. Now you have 2 kids that you can actually treat while you're taking the course. So you have hands-on learning, you have the digital learning. The cases are fantastic because it comes with everything that you need to help those kids. It includes the treatment plan, it includes all of the appliances, it includes specialty appliance cases for the kids to hold their appliances in. It comes with that Healthy Start mobile app. It's literally worth, if you were to charge, regular cost for these cases, it's up to $7,400 of potential treatment fees. So it's more than return on investment, but by the time that you just can, have the benefit of those 2 free cases. You also receive a $3,000 voucher to attend a destination course, so another form of learning. We want to give you every way possible to understand and to get all the education you need. So you have your digital, you have your hands-on, and you also can attend a live course. The $3,000 voucher covers you and 3 of your staff members, so it's really cool. You also receive a sample acrylic stand, and we're going to give you sample appliances so that you can mark it properly and you can put these things in your waiting room, for example. We do provide you with so many different marketing tools, everything you need for your website to ensure you have a proper landing page. We have parent webinars where we will help you understand how to invite parents on to learn about sleep-related breathing disorders and how you can help their kids. As I mentioned, every week there's an interactive study club. So you also receive training on pediatric treatment of sleep-related breathing disorders, how to identify it in your patients, how to use Healthy Start to increase your patient flow. As I mentioned, this includes you and your entire staff. You earn 18 CE PACE credits for the digital course. When you come up to one of our live courses, you actually earn 16 more. So you're pretty set. This is a really great course because ADA actually took our course and said it was ingenious. And I'll tell you, I want to share with you just some other testimonies that we received in reference to our course. Doctor from Australia said the digital course was excellent. all at Healthy Start have really got their act together and offer resources others strive for but rarely achieve. Well organized, passionate, and supportive. Dr. Braun from Canada, I want to thank you and your colleagues for this amazing course. I've been searching for a solid system to help my patients, and this is by far the best, most organized, comprehensive course I've taken. And then Dr. in Denver, Colorado, Dr. Wright, she says, I really enjoyed your course. We've identified quite a few patients that will benefit from Healthy Start. My business partner's 4-year-old is in the habit corrector because he's had swallowing problems, and we've already seen great improvement in his eating. We already have 3 more patients who will be starting next week. We can't wait to see their progress. And I love Dr. Wright's testimony because she was actually only 3 weeks in when she sent me that testimony, which is fantastic. I mean, it's a 6-session course, so she was only 3 weeks in. But the way that happens is because we send you the starter appliances for your 2 free cases immediately, because you can get these 2 kids started on those habit correctors immediately. I'm sure that you have kids in your mind. You're already thinking, oh my gosh, I already know kids who need this, whether it's your own kids or your staff members' children. But what happens is the parents start seeing results. They see their kids feeling better, waking up, happier, doing better in school. There's all kinds of benefits and health benefits that start occurring. And of course, they start spreading the word. They start telling, the other parents in their lives or kids that they see that are having issues like their kids were. And before you know it, they're calling you as the expert to help their children as well. So the financial metrics. So typically, it costs $3,400 to attend the digital education course, which is fantastic. I mean, that includes your entire staff, everybody. So and those 2 free cases. And then the in-person course is $400. But for being on tonight, we're actually giving you a promotion and $3,400, and you can actually attend both. So you can attend the digital education course with those 2 free cases, and you can attend any of our live lectures, and that still includes 3 of your staff members as well, and we'll do that for you all for the same cost. Okay, so we have a course that actually is in session right now. It started on May the 20th, so just a couple weeks in. We could get you integrated, up to date. Everything is recorded. So even those study clubs I was talking about, everything's recorded. So if you can't make it on, if your staff members can't make it on, no big deal. We make sure that you have everything in your inbox. Even if you've attended, you're still going to receive it, so that you can go back and revisit or whatever. So we can get you caught up if you want to start right now. We do have an upcoming course that starts September the 2nd as well. So it's kind of up to you which course you'd like to attend. Simple to register. All you have to do is visit www.openairwaydentistry.com. And there's a little button on there called Register Now. Just looks just like the one on the top of my screen. Just click there. It'll bring up the enrollment form. Just fill that out, and that's it. We will send you everything that you need. We'll send you a welcome package in the mail that has the appliances that you need to get started, that has your agenda, that has your custom cases for the appliances. We'll send you your acrylic stand. We'll send you all kinds of things to get you started and get you going. If you have questions, this is my email address, slafredo@thehealthystart.com. Please feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy. I'm going to be up working for several hours, so email me if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them and help you get rolling. So I always say, now is the time, because there really isn't a better time. Now that you know this information, you can't unknow it. So, this is a problem. There's a solution. So, yeah, we'd love to have you as part of our team and as part of our digital course. So, Leslie, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I just hope that tonight has been one of those moments where it kind of opened your eyes. Maybe you didn't realize how prevalent this condition is. And my hope is that we change children's lives. So if this appears very interesting to you, please don't hesitate. Go ahead, get the information. And I would encourage you, each and every one of you, that no matter what your level of expertise is, please help parents identify these issues in these kids. Take the sleep questionnaire, utilize it in your office, and really make those changes in children. At least provide the education to parents. So anyways, it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your night to listen to this. Hopefully we've made a difference in maybe how you look at children, or maybe your conversation about sleep, breathing, and how airway affects them. So anyways, thank you. Thank you, Susie, so much for always being here and always making this an enjoyable evening. And again, thank you, doctors, for spending your evening with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie, for spending your evening with us and sharing all of that information. Oh, actually, one quick question that popped up. Let's see. Yes, so sorry. Thank you for asking. The question is, how do we get our CE credit? We will actually mail them to you. So we have all of your information and your email address, as long as you, if you put in your email address when you registered for the Zoom. That's the proper email address. We'll actually be sending it to that email address. So if you have some different place that you'd like it sent to, just email me and we'll make sure that it's sent out to you. But it'll be sent out within 24 to 48 business hours. So have a great night. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we hope that you will join this journey with us. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, Susie.
Bye-bye.